Benazir Bhutto and Asif Ali Zardari are on the verge of divorce. General Musharraf sacked the Chief Justice, Iftikhar Mohammad Chaudhry. And then in July, we had another major event, the crackdown at the Red Mosque. And later that year, we saw the culmination of TTP. And what does General Musharraf do? He plans to get himself re-elected as the president. General Musharraf saw that and he said, okay, they are going to maybe invalidate my election. So on 3rd of November, what does he do? He imposes a state of emergency. In October, we saw this horrific attack on her rally in Karachi. By the time I came back, the news broke that she is hurt, and then eventually we were on air that night and all night that she's been assassinated. The PPP won because their leader had just been assassinated, and there was a wave of sympathy. I would probably say 2008. I mean, maybe democracy returns to Pakistan.
As the 2024 elections are just a few days away, I've been wondering what happened in the last 5 elections in Pakistan. Assalamu alaikum, my name is Hawa Fazil and I am a reporter at Dawn.com. Today we have with us someone who I've always admired, whose work I've always looked forward to reading, Mr. Shahzeb Jillani. Sir, we are hoping that today we can discuss with you the 2008 elections, which was one of the most, interesting elections that had to happen, and it was filled with violence as far as I've studied. So can you tell us when did it all become so chaotic in 2007? What was the starting point?
Thank you, Hawa. 2007, as you said, was a tumultuous year, a year of high political drama, a lot of violence, suicide bombings. It was a year of crisis, which sadly ended with the assassination of Benazir Bhutto. In January 2007, I was in Washington as a correspondent for the BBC, and I met Benazir Bhutto there. She was visiting Washington, I think in part, to lobby for a deal with General Musharraf. She knew this was an election year. She had been in exile, and she really wanted to take part in the election. But in order to do that, she needed to use external influence. Remember, at that time, we have George Bush as the president, who's buddies with General Musharraf. He has influence over General Musharraf. The West is becoming increasingly annoyed because they are losing the war in Afghanistan. They are blaming Pakistan. So there are points of differences between Islamabad and Washington. Benazir Bhutto is there to lobby for a potential deal. I remember attending a press conference. There had been a news item in Pakistani newspaper, The News, by, I believe, Mariana Babar, which suggested that Benazir Bhutto and Asif Ali Zardari are on the verge of divorce. He's spending time in New York. She lives in Dubai, looking after children. And when the news conference started, there was a question put to Ms. Bhutto. Now, she obviously knew about the damaging news item. So when she came to Washington, she brought Asif Zardari with her. And he sat there next to her, quiet throughout the press conference, did not utter a word. But Benazir Bhutto wanted to give a very clear message that our marriage is intact. And I think she said there, if I remember correctly, that this is all part of propaganda. She has been attacked before, and this is what the Pakistani authorities always do. But he is proof that he's sitting here with me, and our relationship is fine. So that's how the year started for me. I met her again in February. She had come to Washington to attend what is called this annual interfaith breakfast, which is hosted there, and it's attended by world leaders. It's an opportunity for somebody like Benazir Bhutto to maybe even briefly meet George Bush or people close to him. So this is all part of the lobbying effort. And I remember in that February, we went across to BBC Bureau in a cafe. I had asked her for a cup of tea. and we chatted about Pakistan and its situation. She seemed very determined to come back to Pakistan, to contest elections, and what she was looking for is a level playing field.
Okay. A level playing field. Did she get her level playing field? Was it expected?
So the conversations between foreign friends, General Musharraf, Benazir Bhutto, continued over the next few months. But something unexpected happened in Pakistan in the March of that year. General Musharraf sacked the Chief Justice, Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry.
Okay.
Essentially, he was asked to resign, and he refused.
Okay.
Right, and that's when the country sort of turned against General Musharraf.
Okay.
The lawyers' movement started. The lawyers across the country were up in arms. They sided with the Chief Justice, and General Musharraf's popularity nosedived. Now, at that time, until the lawyers' movement, General Musharraf seemed pretty strong in his position. But the challenge posed by the lawyers' movement showed everyone how unpopular he was, and people were no longer afraid. They were willing to come out on streets, hold rallies. There was a crackdown against them, against top lawyers, but this seemed like the fight for the principle of independence of judiciary.
Okay.
It went on for a few months. Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry was restored as the Chief Justice in July of that year, and he obviously came back with the popular support of the legal fraternity and beyond. And then in July, we had another major event in Islamabad, and that was the crackdown at the Red Mosque.
Oh yeah, the famous one in which it was like on a siege and everything was like breaking news. So what happened? What was that?
So Lal Masjid, as you might know, is very close to the headquarters of the ISI, and for a long time, that place operated. It was seen as a center for promoting jihad in Afghanistan. It was kind of tolerated, but because of growing concern that militant activities over there were getting out of hand, they were really flexing their muscle, the government of General Musharraf decided to act against them. And that commando operation was broadcast live on TV. And there were many casualties there. And it was used by the Islamist and jihadist circles in the country as a reason to declare jihad against the government of Pakistan. And later that year, we saw the culmination of TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Until that point, there were all these different groups in Pakistani tribal areas operating between Afghanistan and Pakistan. But after the Red Mosque, they all came together. And they declared it as their aim to fight the Pakistani government. And we saw violence go up, suicide bombings, attacks, and all that. So the country was not only in sort of a political crisis, there was a very serious security crisis. And what does General Musharraf do? He plans to get himself re-elected as the president. And in October of that year, he contested election. He won by, I believe, 98% of majority. Because remember, at that time, the ruling party is Muslim League Quaid-e-Azam, which was called the King's Party at the time. They had the majority, so he easily won. I remember Justice Bajiuddin Ahmad initially challenged him, and from PPP it was Makhdoom Amin Fahim. But eventually, the PPP, because there was negotiations going on between General Musharraf and People's Party, PPP did not endorse the election, but it also did not resign from the assemblies. It abstained from that election, which allowed him to get himself re-elected. Now, this was important for him because this was part of the deal that General Musharraf will continue as the president, he will hold elections, and if People's Party comes to power, then they will share power going forward. But the major issue was that General Musharraf was still the army chief.
Yes.
Right? And he wanted to get re-elected as a president. A lot of political parties opposed this, and they said, you can't. There was a challenge in Supreme Court as well. Now remember, in Supreme Court, the Chief Justice obviously dislikes him because General Musharraf tried to sack him. So the matter goes to the Supreme Court, and initially they allow the election to go through, but they asked the results not to be notified until later. And then suddenly the Supreme Court decides, after he has won the election, that they're going to convene court. I believe it was on the 5th of November. General Musharraf saw that and he said, okay, they are going to maybe invalidate my election. So on 3rd of November, what does he do? He imposes a state of emergency. He suspends the constitution. Pakistani TV channels are taken off air, and he's trying to preempt what the Supreme Court might do. And that caused another crisis in the country, because now, not only you have lawyers and political parties, the entire country basically up in arms. That here's a man who came to power through a coup, and then again, at any time he's cornered, he will impose emergency again. So that emergency lasted, I believe, more than 40 days. During that time, General Musharraf was compelled to resign as army chief. I believe it was on November 28th. And then he lifted the emergency on December 15th.
How was he compelled to resign as the president?
So he saw that if he wants to continue in office as a civilian president, he will have to give up the uniform. I believe there was also increasing feedback from within the army. Now remember, he was succeeded by General Kiani. And we now know that some part of Pakistani state establishment had given tacit support to the lawyers' movement. So within the army, there was this sense that General Musharraf has been there for nearly 8 years. And when a military army chief becomes the head of the country, through the chain of command, everyone's careers start to suffer. There are no promotions, everything is personality based, and there was growing anxiety reflected there. And I think after the lawyers' movement, and then that which forced him to then cut a deal with Benazir Bhutto, feedback from within the army forced him to think that maybe it's time to resign as army chief, but continue as president. He was very much interested in power and staying on for as long as he can. And he also saw that the Supreme Court is also against me. So that may have led to his decision. But it did not really improve things, because we saw both Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif return to Pakistan, ending their self-exile. And Benazir Bhutto was campaigning when in October we saw this horrific attack on her rally in Karachi, in which more than, I think, 250 people were killed. She survived miraculously. She had been advised time and again not to go back because it was not safe. The Taliban were roaming around the country. They had threatened her. General Musharraf said, I cannot guarantee your security if you come to Pakistan. And yet she took her chances. So in my view, Benazir's previous two governments, we can criticize them for all we want, but I think this decision of hers to put her life at stake, to return to Pakistan, to lead the campaign, was very risky one and very brave one. And even after the Karsaz attack, which she survived, she could have quit the campaign.
Yeah.
Anybody in her shoes would have said, okay, I'm going back to Dubai. My party will run the campaign. I need to stay alive, and it's important. And I think people would have understood.
Yeah.
But I remember her going back to Dubai for maybe a day or two, and everybody said, bhag gayi. And then she came back. And she said, I'm going to continue my campaign. I'm not, if they want to take my life, then so be it. But I'm not going to be deterred. And I was covering that election, and from Karachi, obviously she made her way all the way to Rawalpindi. I attended her last public rally in Larkana, in her hometown. And on the day when she was assassinated, I was meant to be at the Rawalpindi Jalsa. But that morning, I woke up with a really bad feeling. I couldn't put my finger on it. We knew that there were threats to her. General Musharraf had been saying to her, he had actually put her in house arrest for a few days as well to prevent her from coming to Pindi, but she was insistent. And that day, instead of going to Pindi, I went to Mardan to cover ANP rally. By the time I came back, the news broke that she is hurt, and then eventually we were on air that night and all night that she's been assassinated. It was a shocking moment for Pakistan and for the world.
Yeah.
And that assassination then changed the whole election.
Okay. There must have been a lot of sadness and anger and everything else. How did it shape the results of the elections? And more specifically, how did Zardari came about? What happened there? People accepted him really after Benazir?
So we know that Benazir Bhutto, her previous two governments were strongly criticized and even dismissed because of allegations of corruption aimed at Asif Ali Zardari, her husband. And during her time in exile, this came up again and again. And in 2007, she had deliberately decided to keep Asif Zardari out of politics. And that is why he was not contesting any election. He wasn't given a party ticket. And it seems the understanding was that he will stay out of the country. He will stay in Dubai. He will look after the children. And she will take the entire risk by returning to the country and leading the campaign. But after her assassination, obviously Asif Ali Zardari flew to Pakistan for the burial. He refused Benazir Bhutto's autopsy or post-mortem. Benazir Bhutto was buried. The reaction, as I said, was shock and horror in Pakistan, but especially in Sindh province, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of violence. Thousands of trucks, commercial vehicles were torched, banks were looted. It was mass violence because people were in shock. Because to them, this was the second time they were burying somebody from the Bhutto family. Yeah. They had received, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's dead body. It came from Rawalpindi when he was hanged, and then they had to bury Benazir Bhutto, again assassinated in Rawalpindi. So there was a lot of anger, a lot of emotional outpouring, mourning, and violence. Now, Asif Zardari did two things. I was in Larkana, where people were coming for condolences from all over Pakistan. I even interviewed Asif Zardari there. He did two things. First of all, he had the slogan Pakistan Khape, which means he did not want to capitalize on the anger in a way which is detrimental to Pakistan. He said, Pakistan is still our country, which in that time was huge. The other thing he did was he said he basically took over the party, citing a handwritten will by Benazir Bhutto, in which she supposedly said that if something happens to me, I trust my husband Benazir Bhutto to look after the party until you elect somebody suitable. And so he presented that will in a closed-door meeting to senior party members. Nobody, I understand, challenged it, even though a lot of people questioned it later, its authenticity. Can a leader just hand over a party based on a handwritten will? There were a lot of questions, but Asif Zardari wasn't really doubted or questioned within the party, and the transition was relatively smooth. And he said, and I remember very clearly that press conference in which he came, Bilawal Bhutto was there, and he announced that from henceforth, Bilawal Zardari will be called Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. Of course, he would be going abroad to finish his studies, and until that point, I will look after the party. So when he made that announcement, because everybody was in such shock and mourning, nobody really posed any challenge. And that's how Bhutto's party became Zardari's party.
It still is till today. Okay, I see that there was no challenge from inside the party. Did the people really accept him as Benazir's successor to lead the party?
So look, you've just lost your leader. Her son is too young, right? There was a lot of sympathy for Bilawal then, and there's a lot of sympathy for him now, right? But in those circumstances, I don't think people had any option but to accept. And they didn't know how it will pan out. But whatever people say about Asif Zardari, he then proved the art of impossible. Not only getting elected as the president, but finishing 5 years as president, first civilian since Pakistan's creation who completes his tenure. There were a lot of challenges, a lot of intrigues, a lot of problems from the military establishment, from opposition, from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court Chief Justice Iftikhar Chaudhry really hated the PPP government. And every other day there were challenges and scandals and media trial. But Zardari showed a lot of resilience and his ability to not react and seek reconciliation and take it on his chin when he, when he's punched. And that showed for the first time that in Pakistan's peculiar setup, where a civilian government is often subservient to the army, how to survive. And so he not only achieved the distinction of completing the 5-year tenure, and along that time there were these massive constitutional reforms, the 18th Amendment, provincial autonomy, redesignating Northwest Frontier Province as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, a number of reforms. But since then, he has also shown that how, once you get power, how to retain power. And Sindh is an example. 15 years of continuous rule. There were lots of times when attempts were made to dislodge the PPP government, create alliances against the PPP government, but he always sort of finds a way. And that gives him a lot of confidence. And the PPP insiders, admit that maybe Benazir Bhutto was a better politician because she was visionary and a bit idealistic. He is a political operator. He's pragmatic. He understands the power dynamics, and he believes in power sharing. And that has allowed PPP to retain Sindh for 15 continuous years.
So, do you see any similarity between, the upcoming elections of 2024 and the elections that happened in 2008?
Well, look, in those elections, the PPP won because their leader had just been assassinated, and there was a wave of sympathy. I remember in those elections, Parvez Elahi, the leader of Pakistan Muslim League Qaid-e-Azam, was a prime ministerial candidate, and Nawaz Sharif did not even contest elections, right? Shahbaz Sharif did not contest elections initially because there were all these criminal convictions against him. He later won a by-election and became the Chief Minister of Punjab province. So in those elections, it was a three-way fight between PMLQ, Nawaz Sharif's party and People's Party. People's Party emerged as the biggest party because of the sympathy wave, right? And because of Benazir's assassination. This time, it is really between Nawaz Sharif's party and People's Party, because the third major political party, PTI, has been kind of thrown out of the electoral race. And I think this time around, there are a lot of misgivings about elections being free and fair. The mood is totally different. I think the comparison, maybe there will be a better comparison with 2018.
Okay.
You know, an election which is heavily engineered in the run-up to the poll. Courts are involved. There's a lot of selection, picking and choosing going on. So I think this election compares and probably is worse than 2018. It doesn't necessarily has as many similarities with 2008.
Okay. So if let's say someone gave you a summary of this whole election and they told you to, give it a headline, what would be your headline for the 2008
for
election?
2008, these elections were being held. Yes, President was Musharraf, but he was not army chief, right? The 2002 election was again, hugely managed by General Musharraf to have the King's Party. I would probably say 2008. I mean, maybe democracy returns to Pakistan, but at a huge cost. At the cost of, they only decided to back off from heavy engineering after the assassination of Benazir Bhutto, and in a country, where top leaders have to literally die sometimes for other powerful quarters to realize that this is supposed to be an organic process. It shouldn't come down to this. It shouldn't come down to violence and assassinations for few people, powerful people, to realize that, look, public sentiment is too hot, we need to back off and let things take a natural course. So I think it's a huge tragedy for a country like Pakistan.
But it was democratic. These elections were democratic?
It was fairly democratic, especially because it came right after such a massive tragedy. Even if they wanted to block PPP, it may have been difficult. And there were many constituencies, even in Sindh, that I can think of, where PPP may not have won.
Okay.
Had the assassination not taken place. But after the assassination, the opponents of PPP basically stayed home. They never even came out to campaign in January and February. And it became a one-sided election, especially in Sindh.
Yeah, it was a one-sided election. So there was also a little bit of delay after her assassination. How long was that delay?
The original date of election was in January. But because of the assassination, the elections were pushed to Feb 18th, I believe. The PPP believes that it shouldn't have been pushed. We might have gotten even more seats if it happened on time. But I think there was justification for it because there was so much violence in the country, and especially in Sindh, that maybe the Election Commission was justified in pushing it further by a couple of weeks.
So we are ending our conversation here with Shahzeb Jillani after learning a lot about the 2018 elections in such a close capacity that he was, and the events that went on one by one. Thank you, Shahzeb Jillani Saab, for this lovely conversation. I've enjoyed it.
Pleasure. You took me down memory lane. We tend to forget these things, but I think it's important to revisit history, to understand we have come here. It's been a long journey and difficult journey.
It's been a long, and we have had elections, tough elections before as well.
Yeah.
So my name is Hawa Fazil. I'm signing off today. If you want to see the whole series of these elections, it's available on Dawn News English, and the article for it will be available on dawn.com. Thank you so much.